Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the most exciting World Chess Championship match that the chess world has seen in a very long time. It's Yan Nepomniachtchi of Russia, it's Ding Liren of China. They've played 9 games. The score is 5 for Yan and 4 for Ding. To win, you need to score 7.5 points because they play 14 games. This is game number 10, and today, in game number 10, I'm not going to say anything, not going to be too many spoilers, or any at all, but today was a disaster. And today, something very, very bad happened. Let's jump in. So, Ding has surveyed both d4 and c4 in this match. Some of them have worked out quite well, like the games that he won in the London and the English. Others did not work out so well. Like the game that he played, this very offbeat pawn to h3. That was game number 2. That feels like it was centuries ago. But no, it very much was during the duration of this match. This time he plays the English again. Knight to f6 by Yan. Knight c3. e5. The same exact setup, by the way. Yan doesn't play e5 straight away. He plays knight f6. And that, I think, is actually taking a little bit of the sting out of the move g3. I do suppose that with this move, you are inviting some main lines with c4, e5, g3, the king's bishop English, where this knight doesn't actually have to be on the c3 square. This time, pawn to e5, we have the 4 knights. And you will remember that the last time we played the 4 knights English, or maybe you do not remember whatsoever, Ding played the main line e3, bishop b4, queen c2, and took like this, and then put his pawn on e4, and so on. This time, he plays e4 in one go. Now, traditionally speaking, this move has been kind of looked at in a very odd way. I mean, it just simply doesn't make any sense. Like, okay, you're stopping the move d5, but you're doing this in a way that your d4 square is terrible. You're blocking in your bishop. Like, why is your pawn there? I mean, if you wanted to play a 4 knights, it's like a 4 knights game, right? Like, let's say it's like 4 knights. Typical beginner chess, but then for some reason, instead of putting the bishop out to c4 or something, you put the pawn out to c4. Is this good? Is this bad? I don't know. Time will tell. Well, we have bishop to c5. Now, I've also faced bishop b4 in this position, and remember from the previous game, bishop b4 can actually become something that looks very similar to what we saw in the other game. So after bishop b4, white can still kind of maintain the central grasp. Bishop c5 has a very direct idea. Bishop c5 is an extremely forcing move, and if you're going to play the move e4, bishop c5 comes in, and the truth is that if white just develops normally, white is just worse. Because this bishop is better than this bishop. Black will play a6 so the bishop can leave, and very good control of d4. And if white plays something like d3 to play bishop g5, black will play h6. So basically, black is like threatening, literally, to have a better position on move 4. That's not where disaster struck in this game. I do apologize, by the way, if I sound like terrible. Allergies, bit of a cold. Just not feeling great. But feels much better than having COVID 4 months ago, I'll tell you that much. And the only way that white has a way to get an advantage in this position is by playing a trick. White has a trick in this position. And that trick is knight takes e5. This is called the center pawn fork trick. And it also occurs in 4 knights positions. This is for some of the more advanced beginners watching. Technically, the move bishop c4 is inaccurate in the 4 knights because of knight e4, knight e4, d5. Of course, white saves the bishop, and white is still completely fine. But in this game in particular, you are trying to do the exact same thing. This works if they have to take back with the knight, and then it also works if you then have a fork. Now, again, of course, black should save the bishop. Black also in this position can play bishop takes f2 check, which is kind of a funny move, but it doesn't really work because I just get too much. Okay, you could check me, I can go back to g1, h3, and life is good. So, d4, bishop b4, pitting the knight to the queen. There is nothing else except taking. Now black will respond knight e4, and now white here can play queen d4, queen f3, and I think queen g4 if I'm not mistaken. There is some really ridiculous line that the computer, I think, needs a little bit of time to think about. But definitely queen d4 and definitely queen f3 are lines. Maybe queen d3 is also a line. I've seen queen g4 and queen g7, but black really has to know the line there. Of course, these guys do know the line. So queen f3 is played in the game, hitting the knight and defending this. Knight c3, bc3, and now we can sort of breathe. You will notice both guys have played 9 moves in 2 minutes. So they clearly know what they're doing. White has accepted a bad structure for a very advanced center pawn, attacking possibilities on the king, and a bit more of an active queen with the move queen to g3. It's actually very difficult for black to defend this pawn. In fact, black, if they play g6, will probably just already land in a completely lost position. White gets bishop d3, bishop g5, h4, h5, castle. Position is like really, really, really miserable for black. Now, Jan plays king f8. Okay, and you'll notice after bishop c5, Ding actually spent quite a bit of time here. That might be because the main line is bishop a5. So bishop going here instead of there is probably what Ding had prepared, because this actually has a very clear target. Like retreating the bishop to a5 seems natural. Then after queen to g3, black even can start firing back, because taking on g7, of course, just runs into bishop c3. Bishop e5, and then bishop a1. But he plays bishop c5, which is clearly what he prepared, right? Queen to g3, and now king to f8. Black now not only has a lack of space in the center, and white has attacking chances, black also cannot castle. So instead of weakening his own pawn structure, black has opted to sacrifice the castling rights. Now, visually, it looks like white has a fantastic position. White is going to go here or here, bishop f4, white is going to castle. White will bring the second rook. But listen, Jan played all these moves without thinking, so obviously he knows what he's doing. Ding develops the bishop to e2. Again, 15 minutes to develop either this, or this. That's wild. I mean, I would love to know what he was calculating. He chooses bishop e2. He chooses bishop e2 for a couple of reasons. I think bishop d3, he didn't like that the queen would hit the bishop. He also probably did not like that when the rook goes here, it's not actually sufficiently pressuring anything because the bishop is in the way. So he chooses to put the bishop on e2. Jan plays d6 in a minute, right? Because Jan doesn't have anything else. I mean, Jan, he cannot move any of his back rank of pieces, so he needs to play d6. Now Ding plays bishop f4 with the intention of recapturing like this, setting up that, and rook d1 as well. Again, visually, position looking absolutely fantastic for white, but he's down 25 minutes, and just judging from the time management and the complete ridiculousness of this position, probably Jan knows something about this. And finally, he thinks for the first time, he plays queen to e7. We have rook to d1, played by Ding, obviously centralizing. He doesn't want to capture yet. And in this position, Jan plays the move h5. Now, you want to know something fascinating about this position? Of course you do. You're watching this recap. This is move 13 of the World Chess Championship. Ding Liren is white, Jan Nepomniachtchi is black. This position has occurred before. 3 years ago. In that game, Jan Nepomniachtchi was playing white. Jan Nepomniachtchi has actually seen this position before. I don't know if he remembers that, though, because that game in 2020 was played in Title Tuesday on chess.com. Jan was white against a 2400. The 2400 had this position with black. Jan had this position with white. Isn't that insane? Does Jan know that? That would be completely unbelievable. I mean, if you just remembered a totally obscure Title Tuesday game from over 3 years ago, that would be sensational stuff. So Jan has actually played this exact same thing with white, which means he thinks it's pretty good. And in that game, Jan played h4. And actually, I think after DE, bishop e5, bishop g4, I think Jan was struggling a little bit with white. But he won, of course, because he's the better player. It was an equal game, though. But actually, white does not need to overreact and play h4 at all. White can just castle, and that's exactly what Ding does. And he maintains kind of this slightly pleasant position. But the truth is, because white's structure is so bad, he needs to win. I mean, he needs to win using his pieces over here. If he's unable to, black will just build up a fortress and be completely fine. So now Ding does, in fact, allow h4. and rotates his queen to d3. He would like to go here, and the avalanche would fall on black. I mean, black is just moments away from being in a critical situation. For example, if black just plays a lackadaisical, well, I guess d6 is hanging, but, you know, if you allow white to maximally improve with rook e1, white is just in great shape. So in this position, Ding needs to resort to violent measures. He needs to resort to offbeat measures to try to fight back, and he does that. He has now moved his h-pawn all the way forward. His pieces are kind of stuck. He hasn't moved any of these back row pieces, and it continues as he plays the move g5. I mean, this is ludicrous. This is completely insane that you can play chess like this. You can just play your h and g pawns. You don't have to castle. I mean, it looks like black is a 700. Like, really, like, it looks like white is maybe like a trainer, like trying to coach black. And black is, I'm not saying Jan is playing like a 700. He's playing like a 2795 and is leading the world championship match. But if you just take a snapshot of this position, I mean, it just looks completely absurd, right? This looks nuts. Black has broken every principle in chess. Every single one. And yet is not even worse. Now, by the way, if white retreats, he's simply losing the pawn on e5. So it's time for Ding to take on d6, and take on d6, and take on d6, and take on d6. Oh, and by the way, if you didn't quite understand what the game plan was, it was to take on d6, and take on d6, and take on d6, and take on d6. And I just brought this up. I literally just brought this up because in my recaps, I like to foreshadow things that happen in a minute to then recall them. So really hammering that knowledge home. I just mentioned to you a minute ago, white's structure is terrible, right? White's pawn structure is terrible. So white really needs to win the game. Because look at this. This is white's advantage. It's 3-on-2, but the structure, if this was here, white is winning, like easily. Because you just advance the pawn and you create a passed pawn, oops, and the pawn is, but you can't. You have no way of creating a passed pawn, and not only can you not create a passed pawn, I'm gonna go full Pac-Man on these pawns. I'm gonna wah, 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 and that's it. That's like, you're not gonna win. So Ding is a touch better, a touch, like, boop. Bishop 2e6, and now Ding plays f4. Now, make no mistake, if an amateur or even an advanced player had this position with black, they would probably find a way to lose, because it's not easy to defend. It's not easy to defend in chess. For example, here, black really only has one defensive plan. Can you find it? If you thought it was g4, that's a terrible move, and after f5, it's +5. So see, there you go. Right? Like, you know, now you could take on f4, but that's, the real major idea here is to put the king into the center. It's to play king e7, force the rook back, and when the rook does come back, you have takes and something like this, and the rooks are defending the pawn, but they're not creating any offense. Now we have h3. That h-pawn has marched all the way down the board. Now it can freeze, and whatever white does, it really doesn't matter. Either you take, and this is the ugliest pawn structure of all time, either you allow yourself to get taken, but then I have like actual targets on the g file, or you play g4. And that's probably the best move. The rooks defend that, and they defend that, and your king can walk up to the g3 pawn. I mean, it seems like you have all the major assets to win a game, and yet you have no ability to go play defense. The rook is just like playing Snake. You ever play Snake on those phones back in the day? I'm giving you all the 90s kids shout outs in today's recap. I used to beg my dad to play Snake on his phone. Yeah, I mean, white can defend that thing, but look at this. White cannot cross at all. None of white's pawns can move. Frankly, white's rooks can't move either. And look at b6. That's it. Everything in black's position is protected. You just cannot cross the center line at all. Nothing can cross. There is zero play to be created. Literally the only thing that white can do, well, let's watch. King g3, rook h6, rook e4 pin, king just walks out of the way. Now, you would think giving a check is the right thing to do. Look at this. Oh, infiltration. Oh my goodness, the rook is so scary. Yeah, now the rook just comes back. The rook just comes back. And Jan is smart enough to realize he can part with the a pawn to win the c pawn, and his rook defends the b pawn. And at some point, rook trade won't even help. Bishop b3. Look at this fancy schmancy move, sacrificing the bishop as a defensive measure. We have takes, rook c3, and that's it. Now we're down to rook and 3 versus rook and 3. Rook b5. The only thing black needs to do is not trade the rooks. Why? Because king h3. And, I mean, black can do anything. King f6, king h3. And that's just winning. So, rook b5, rook a3. And my friends, this is very different. The lesson there, why is this winning, but why is this a draw? It's because of the rooks. The existence of the rooks creates enough counterplay for black that you do not lose this game. And in fact, he was so confident, he played f5. Just completely giving up the pawn, because the pawn is going to be won back. You can defend it, king f6, but this endgame, after rook f5, this is a draw. King and 2 pawns, or king and 3 pawns versus king and 2 is winning. King and 1 is only winning if certain criteria are met, and they're not met here. h5, and game 10 is a draw. And may I add something? This was probably the worst game of the match. Not from quality perspective. This was the least fun game. This was the game where nothing happened. Absolutely nothing happened. When I woke up this morning, and I kind of groaned. I was like, oh no, did they burn out all their fuse? There's now games 11, 12, 13, and 14. Ding has to win. He's down 5.5, 4.5. He's got to win one of the games. There is no alternative. So I don't know what's going to happen, but I look forward to game number 11. I don't think we're ever going to see Ding play e4 again on move 4. Jan clearly came with bulletproof preparation, bishop c5. And it's kind of insane that Jan actually had this position and was one of the only people in the database to have this position, but he played extremely creatively defensively, sacrificed the pawn to get into an endgame where he had virtually no losing chances, defended actively, and did a very nice job, and game 10 is in the books. And it wasn't the most fun, but not all games can be decisive, so I'll see you for game number 11. Get out of here.